Hey folks, welcome to another Triple T Thursday. For those just joining us, that's Tools, Tips, and Talk, where we'll talk about info for the knife maker. In today's episode, the 5 steps you need to do to get perfect guard fit up. So let's go through those. We'll take you through how to fit that guard to get a nice, perfect fit up, no spacing under your guard. Let's get to it.
Okay folks, let's talk about step number 1 in perfect guard fit up. And the first step really is to make sure you file your shoulders with one of these. This is a file guide. So you just clamp this onto your knife and then put this in a vise and file down these shoulders. And you can run your file across these so that these two are the same level here. Sometimes you can also actually run your file this way, like this, and then take down the tang part so that the tang is a little thinner, and then when you put your guard on, your guard will actually sit on top of a shelf here. Obviously you're going to do this before heat treat because you won't be able to file it after. You'll notice that this is after heat treat for me. That's because I'm going to do this in the mill, but I will talk about how to do this and do all of the steps if you don't have a mill. So I'm going to be milling these shoulders. If I was doing this in a, on a vise, this is how I would do it. Okay, so I've got this seated in my vise. I've got a piece of leather here, so I've actually got the knife inside of the leather, and I've just got the file guide sitting on top of the vise jaws. And then you would just take this and just go over this and take this down exactly the same on both sides. And like I said, you could take these sides down if you wanted to have a shelf here. So here it is after milling the shoulders. And again, you can get pretty close just using a file guide and files. The key is that this piece here and this is straight across. Step 2 for perfect guard fitment is sanding the blade fully before you go to the next step. Reason being is that if you try to measure this and, slot your guard, after you sand it, you're going to remove a little bit of material here, even if it's a tiny bit. So I sand this fully, at least to, if I'm going to go to 1,000, I'll sand this at least to 800 before I take the measurement to get the slot for the guard. So I've only done this to 220, so let's take this to 800. Okay, so we've completed step 2, which is fully hand sanding the blade. Let's talk about step 3. So before you go and slot your guard, the first thing you need to do is get these two sides parallel. However you're going to do that, either on your 2x72 on a flat platen, or whatever you have. You need to get this nice and parallel so that it doesn't fit askew on the handle, because that will affect everything. I happen to do this on the mill. I just milled the top. I ground one side and then I mill the top flat and then I mill the two sides. So I have this perfectly parallel square and ready to go. Step 4. So we're going to measure with calipers the width of our tang here. Another important aspect is you want to make sure your tang is the same width here as it is here. Because if it tapers at all, that's going to affect your slot here, because normally your slot's going to be the same thickness all the way through. So I'm going to measure this and then I'm actually going to mill it, but I'll talk about how to do this just with drilling and filing. Okay, so let's measure our tang here. I'm at about 0.131. Yeah, really close. I'm within a 20 thousandths on either side, so 0.13. So if you're going to do this with drilling and filing, what I would recommend is mark your center line, use a punch and put marks on it, and then undersize your holes because you're going to want to work up to where your line is. So definitely mark it out, and then it's just trial and error to keep going back and forth with this. If you're going to be filing, this is where it's nice to have a shoulder here. So to to file a shoulder on here so that it's going to fit nice against that. I'm going to be using a mill, so I'm going to be using a slightly different technique. I'm going to go down probably 95% through this, slightly bigger than the tang, or that it will fit easily. And then the last piece, the 10% of it, this much, I'm going to do it slightly smaller than the tang. And then I'm going to hammer it on so that I get a perfect fit all the way around. And you'll see how I do that. I would recommend for this, you definitely have a good set of files, and you're going to need needle files and some smaller, regular files and then some smaller needle files to drill those holes and then connect them up. I'm a big fan, of course, of Nicholson files. You know, you're going to need to get yourself a good set of files. Okay, let's go do this on the mill.
You'll notice I'm drilling holes close together here instead of just using the end mill. Doing this saves your end mills because there's a lot less side cutting. It's much better for them.
Okay, so I've milled the slot and the guard. I want to draw you a cross-section of what I've actually done. So think of this as the guard. Okay, I've drilled down or milled, but then at the bottom, this is accentuated a little bit, but I've basically left it like that. So now when I take the knife, last step, I'm going to hammer it on, and that will squish these little areas. And again, these are really, really tiny, like 0.01 inches. So I'm going to drill this. That will squish these out. It'll mushroom a little bit, and it might mushroom them up. But that's fine, because you're going to sand this part of the guard down anyway. That will make it fit nice and tight, wrapped all the way around your guard. But you say, well, I don't have a mill. What should I do? Well, one way to do this, it's a little trickier, but like I said, you could file a recess on either side. The other way is when you actually file this, file it at a bit of an angle like this. Well, sorry, I'll do the same. Like this. Again, this is a little more pronounced than it actually would be. Then the same thing, when you drive this up, it will mushroom these out a little bit. So make sure that you put your tang in here and it's sticking a little bit. You want it tight because you want to be able to hammer it on. Okay, let's talk about the last step, how to hammer the guard onto the tang. Okay, let's talk about putting the guard on the knife. The very first thing you want to do, obviously you're going to need a vise. I like to have a piece of leather, and I will kind of put the leather right where the plunge is. Just put the leather there. It helps it grip so it doesn't slide down. And now just lock this in your vise. Make sure you're not hitting the bottom here, and lock it tightly in the vise. There. Now put your guard on and make sure the side that is the thinner side. The side that's going to mushroom is towards the knife, and you have this oriented the right way. Yeah, so it's going to be this way. Okay, and I've tapered this tang, so you see it goes almost all the way down. It's about 1 inch from the bottom. Now I take these 2 pieces of leather on either side. I'll take a washer that I've just cut a space out, and then I'll use just a little square piece of pipe that I fashioned just so I can put it over the tang. Okay, then I'll just tap it with a hammer. You want to make sure you have your where you actually want this thing. This just a little bit. There. All right, that looks pretty good. Sometimes you need to move it a bit, but that is pretty much perfect. So let's see if I can get this on camera here. There it is. That is pretty much a perfect fit up. There's no space whatsoever. All right. So we got our guard perfectly fit up to our knife. Now, obviously we need to finish this. I also need to etch this because this is Damascus guard. How do I get it off? That's pretty easy. You just put this back in here, just a little loose though, so this slides up and down. You take your same piece of leather and now just put it over top, and I usually hold the knife with one hand, and now you're just going to give it a tap, and it usually comes off a little easier. There you go. So now we can finish our guard. We know it comes on, and each time you're going to have to hammer it on and off, but you should get the exact fit up. So there you go, folks.
Thanks for joining me, folks. I hope you got something out of today's episode and you've learned how to perfectly fit your guard onto your knife. We're not going to do any viewer knives this week, but we'll probably do some next time. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you soon.